Thank you, Sandeep, for joining me on the show today. It's a real pleasure to have you on. I've been looking forward to this conversation for a while now. You are the co-founder and COO of Polygon, a blockchain scalability platform with a pretty large market cap. You're also the founder of India COVID Relief Fund, which was a huge success to support, COVID relief in India, obviously. It's great to have you on. For those who don't know you, would love to hear the long version of your story from sort of as early as you're willing to start to where you are and what you're doing today and some of the decisions you made along the way.
Awesome. Thanks for having me here, Jake. The journey for me has been fairly long. I got born in a very humble, background in India, and doing business sort of like was always in my mind. I would not say in my blood because all my ancestors, like previously, they used to be like my like, for example, my grandfather and my maternal grandfather used to be household servants in some big people's homes. So the business, I don't think, was in our blood, but somehow, like, I always wanted to do business right from a very early age. Trying to sell some pens in my this thing, to start to trying to build some computer applications when I joined my computer science engineering. I was not lucky enough to have computer in my home when I was in, let's say, fifth or sixth standard, or when I was 10-11-year-old. I got my first computer when I actually joined my engineering after finishing my school, the elementary school. I tried my hands at various different kinds of businesses before, and then off late, like in the last 5-10 years, I was more focused on tech. So during my last year of engineering itself, I landed a very although very complicated but very interesting project from a political party in India, who wanted to scan through all the kind of manual PDF based information of all the Indian citizens, let's say in their voter cards, and then do some analytics on top of it. So it was a very complicated project, and some of the agencies were not able to do it, or they were able to do it, but they were not able to do it at a scale where you could actually scan through tens of millions of user records. So we kind of figured out some efficient way of doing that. So that was very interesting, and that was like a first real world project that I did, and made some money from that. And then eventually I joined some enterprises, initially Computer Sciences Corporation from the US, to understand how business is conducted at a larger scale. And then I also landed later on a senior role in a e-commerce company as the CTO over there. And that this was the time, as I said, that I came from humble background. I had to put food on the table. But I generally mention this, that my girlfriend at that time, now my wife, she said that I will, like, I'm also earning. Don't worry about it. Take the risk and go out. And this was the first time somebody gave me some support. That okay, before that I was the support for, because being the eldest child in the whole kin, basically. So yeah, then I didn't look back from there. Immediately went out. Some people had been looking to invest in whatever I was going to do, and then Indian startup ecosystem was also blossoming. So I raised some angel funds, did a small initially did a B2B marketplace, kind of like trying to do a Alibaba for India, but for the services, because India is like the way China is for manufacturers. India is for knowledge service providers. But then it's very hard to scale it in the form of a product, because the projects require a lot of to and fro interaction between human beings. So I kind of figured out that this will not scale, although it started making me a decent amount of money. I had quite a few clients, And then that is the time when I started, I started thinking about, because I was very clear that if I wanted to come in business, but I did not want to do a small scale business. I wanted to do something big. And that was the time I started going back to my computer science. I was playing the CEO role in these startups, but then I said that, I want to go back to my technology roots, and I started learning about AI. Initially it was kind of had too much of mathematics for me to go deep into it. So I stumbled onto, Bitcoin, which was picking up steam back in 2016. And yeah, and I started reading about mastering Bitcoin. And I think one good insight somehow luckily I got is that, this the way this the way this basically Bitcoin blockchain is nothing but a decentralized computer which is computing a very small logic, which is basically somebody pays something to someone and their balance goes up, the other guy's balance go down. And this is the small business logic that is being computed. But what if more complicated business logic can be computed at this distributed and decentralized scale or decentralized manner. And few weeks or probably a month later, I stumbled onto Ethereum, and which was exactly what I mean, what I had thought. And then I was like really all in into that, like from that day. Very funny story is that before that I had bought some bitcoins the moment I got to know about Ethereum, and thought about it like for a few days, and I immediately converted everything I had in Ethereum. And since then, like even after, like I mean, I am now like one of the co-founders at Matic, so I hold large amount of Matic. Technically all of my Matic I've not sold too much of it, like only 5-10%. 90% I still own. So but then my rest of the portfolio has for the largest time existed always in Ethereum. So that was the kind of, because I was already looking for something like that, and when I came across Ethereum, it was kind of the kind of like the love at first sight kind of situation for me. And then since then, I've been into Ethereum community. And then I met my other co-founder, JD, who was from Indian community, where we met. And then he's like more on the, like, although he has great business sense, but he was working on this, developing this plasma solution within the Ethereum group. And when I saw the POC that he was working for, and I had already built like as consultant, because in between I did some consulting for other people once I started learning coding and all that, and setting up the nodes and all that. So I had done some consulting and built some dApps, and I clearly knew that with, especially with that CryptoKitties moment, I clearly knew that this is not ready for dApps, and if we could build something like that, this is what the world is looking for. And yeah, like from there, the whole journey of Polygon started. And since then I'm falling deeper and deeper into the rabbit hole.
Yeah, that's awesome. I appreciate you sharing the story and giving us the long version here. I want to plug into a few different parts of sort of the story that you said. The first thing I thought was super interesting, coming from a super humble background, it sounds like in India, your grandparents having been like house servants, and now obviously with Polygon's success, if not the success of some of your other ventures before that, but this on a totally different scale. You're able to sort of like bring money to your family and friends, I assume. What's it like just like in a lifetime, not even a full and long lifetime yet, you're still relatively young, to just have that change of circumstance that you sort of earned through your interest in technology and business and starting to act on it and actually build and realize this enormous success?
Yeah, I mean, it's been like a really proud feeling from my family also. And definitely their lifestyle has also changed drastically. Like as early as 2015-16, we still used to live in a single room kind of place, like single room kitchen, like a very small place. Like we are three siblings. And then today our lifestyle has immensely changed from there. So definitely for them, they are very happy. I mean, like I even remember my mom saying that, like just going to the grocery store and buying a lot of stuff, like, gives her some sort of adrenaline rush, because, previously it was like, you go and then you basically go hand to mouth, like you pick up whatever you need for the next week and things like that. So, small things like that, flying in the aeroplane, like, I think 6 months back only, they first time they flew in on a plane. So that was also a very nice experience for them. So definitely, like, it's very, very heartwarming. And being a man, I think overall, like, I mean, again, I don't want to go into the stereotypes, but I'm saying being like a especially growing in an Indian household, where you are considered to be the provider of the house and things like that, you anyways develop this feeling, like this sort of pleasure in giving, right? So I mean, that's true for me also, in any case. And being the eldest child in the entire kin, that even make that feeling even stronger. So now I'm not even like, I mean, doing whatever for my immediate family, but for my cousins and whatever they have been doing, and they do like very kind of menial jobs, and I'm trying to kind of see how I can uplift them from their kind of situation. They're like, so things, some of the things like that. And then, but on the flip side, for my wife, like, she never really was behind money. Like, she was always like, okay, you spend time with me, and then we have a good experience of life. Like, I mean, she is not the one who runs after the money and all that. And then, from her side, the reaction is sometimes slightly different, and she's like, oh, you are always busy, and what is all of this for? Like, at the end of the day, if you are not keeping on your taking care of your health and all that. So it's kind of mixed reactions in from various sides, but definitely it's like, now a very, very different situation. And for personally, for me, I feel that, with where Polygon has come and what the potential that Web3 technology has, especially coming from India, like where we come from a socialist background previously. And then, now, I mean, the corruption is rampant. There is still a lot of hunger, poverty, and all that. And, somehow I feel that crypto basically is a mid path between communism and capitalism, right? Like, communism is like everything is owned by the community, and as an individual you lose your existence, whereas capitalism focuses on being like extremely individualistic and incentives driven and things like that, whereas crypto somehow brings in a means to bring like these incentives, whereas incentives, while contributing to a community, to one place. So I kind of feel that it kind of offers a new paradigm which can uplift people, in terms of building a good and a benevolent, as well as like a growing system or thriving system, where everybody can achieve prosperity, at least in the basic necessities of life. And that's why, like, it kind of makes me feel immensely responsible, that now I am at this situation, and I need to like, maybe probably God has chosen me, or not like only me, but a lot of people like me. But I have a very strong sense of responsibility, that we need to do something to uplift a large number of people out of their whatever miseries they have in life, and then provide them at least the basic necessities of life. And I feel in India there's a lot of scope for public goods and having blockchains in governance and things like that, where it can bring more transparency as well as accountability, thereby bringing a more efficient system for the masses.
Yeah, and I appreciate that response. I mean, it was really interesting to hear not only your own perspective on sort of the change of circumstance that you've created for yourself, but also your wife's perspective, your family's perspective, and understanding like your wife's perspective also, that like it's not all good. Like, you're very busy now, and to your point, you have this tremendous responsibility, which I imagine like you're working super hard, and oftentimes health and taking care of yourself can sort of be sacrificed in the process of all that. But you've certainly already started along this path. Before we get into Polygon, maybe we can talk about the India COVID Relief Fund, which I brought up at the top of the show. You started this when there was a big surge of COVID in India earlier this year. And I'm not sure what you had in mind for it exactly, but it ended up raising tons and tons of money. I think you guys have over $400 million currently in your crypto wallets for the nonprofit. I'm curious to hear like what, it's one thing to say like I want to help out, and another thing to raise a fund that raises that much money. And then you then have the issue of like, how do I actually deploy all this money and give it to the right people to do the right things? And I imagine it's just like a huge challenge. And, it's not like this is your first and only job. You're also building this, hugely powerful protocol in Polygon, which has a ton of pressure in running. Like those two projects combined must be a lot. And I'm curious how you sort of got the conviction that you were the person to do that and to start that. And then secondarily, how it's been to manage and run with whatever your early expectations were. I'm sure they've been exceeded.
Yeah, I mean, I never really thought, when I made that tweet that, okay, I'll take personal responsibility of this and to doing that. I thought maybe, I'll get maybe $1 million or maybe $5 million in the wildest of scenarios, and I can take, responsibility of that. I thought that, I'll receive that money, I'll immediately deploy it for the immediate need with a group of volunteers, and then from there we will, sort of. Go from there, and I can transparently provide all the data and everything to the government and all that, because it's blockchain and things like that. But once it went viral from there, it has become like a huge, as I was saying, that responsibility, because all of these funds, like first of all, these are like a large amount of like DD has to be done, because India has had a history of like a lot of NGOs kind of looking for cash grabs and things like that. So we need to ratify that whether an NGO is going to do what they are going to do. And imagine like even if a single dollar lands in wrong hands, and something that is not in line with the local establishments, they say something, and we know how Twitter space acts, right? Even some guy says some small thing, everybody forgets everything else, and those like small, let's say something happens, and then everybody focuses on that. Even if it's a wrong allegation, you lose your reputation and all that, and that will be like completely unfair to Polygon also and my other co-founders. Let's say if something happens on this, and or something happens, and which kind of takes effect on the, everybody else's interests also. So that's why, like, I mean, I set up a very strong and very ethical team of for doing due diligence. And then we have currently deployed around $45 million out of $400 million. And definitely that even I have spoken to Vitalik also a few times. He was also like, just deploy it as soon as possible on the ground. But I explained to him that this is a huge amount of money for India, and if it goes and falls in wrong hands, or even let's say the opposition parties in the establishment, this might create a huge problem for me also, like on a regulatory level, and probably for the whole crypto ecosystem. So it's been an immensely challenging situation for setting up these entities and things like that. That time when it was happening, I mean, I had to go with a very fast setup so that I can bring money into India. And India, you can't touch crypto. I mean, I could not send crypto directly to these NGOs, because nobody would accept that. So we had to convert that money into a bank account and then send that money to only government approved NGOs who are kind of eligible to receive money from outside, and you have to do a lot of due diligence for them. So it's kind of like a big deal in itself. I mean, a big kind of work in itself. But then now we are looking at, because of now this COVID wave has also passed. So now we are looking at doing long-term stuff. Like one of the proposals now we are working at is basically setting up a cutting edge viral and infectious disease institute in India which kind of take the leadership in predicting as well as specifying the way. Like, a lot of people in India died because there was no coherent manual for the doctors to follow on how to treat this, right? So that was also a big thing. But on the other side, we are also still trying to help however we can, the government, in the form of deploying vaccines to each and every citizen of India. We recently secured around 300 syringes because now India has vaccine, but the problem is now on the syringes side. And then distribution channels have also been problem. So we are technically, like, government does not allow any private party in India to get into vaccines, but what we are doing is trying to support governments on the ancillaries around it. So yeah, I mean, there are a lot of fronts open over there. Like, I can talk probably for more than an hour on only that. But yeah, that's where we are today with that.
Yeah, well, I don't want to spend the whole time on it because I do want to discuss your main project, Polygon. But it's really I admire the work that you're putting in on both ends. I view both projects as being very beneficial, but one in the immediate term is certainly helping a lot of people. Mentioned like deploying already $30 million or so, and I think the good news is, despite it makes sense why you can't just deploy all this stuff overnight. Um, the good news is I think hopefully most of it is sitting in where it's sitting in crypto. I think the vast majority of it's in Ethereum and other ERC20 tokens, and hopefully those will just appreciate over time, and you can actually end up doing even more, having a greater impact with all this money than maybe even initially you thought was possible, even though it's already a ton of money. But I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about Polygon. But before we get there, just rewinding sort of your origin story in crypto. You mentioned discovering Bitcoin, I think in 2016, reading like Mastering Bitcoin book. And then in just a matter of a few weeks or maybe a month, you found Ethereum, which was, that wasn't so early for Bitcoin, but that was very early for Ethereum. And quickly realized, like you said, love at first sight. This was something that you sort of had imagined before you came across the fact that it existed. I'm curious to know what was sort of different, given that you had sort of come to this conclusion that something like Ethereum should exist in your head. I'm curious to know, like, when you actually came across Ethereum, were there any like surprises or differences between what it was doing and what you had sort of imagined, and just with that initial recognition of this project that you had sort of envisioned to some degree, like what that experience was like and what might have been different?
When I came across Ethereum, as I said that I was expecting, I was like, in back of the mind, I would not say that I had this like exact vision on how it will happen, but the way Ethereum was doing it was very was kind of you know long term and kind of developer focused, because I also saw after that, like, some platforms like which were doing non-Turing complete languages where you can do something but you can't do everything. But Ethereum was focusing on building a Turing complete virtual machine, which was very interesting to me, because then technically sky is the limit to build on that. And if you want to kind of have a developer ecosystem which you want to become like self-sustainable, people are kind of incentivized and motivated to do and kind of pursue crazy ideas, and those ideas don't have any limits. I think that's what they did very well. Previous to that, I was thinking that, okay, probably you will have some sort of common design patterns, and then you can match them, because obviously I had, like, deeply studied Bitcoin network and UTXOs. So kind of my mind by that time was coming or thinking in that direction, that probably these UTXOs, instead of UTXOs, you will have these chunks of some common computation patterns, and then you will combine them and you can do some things. But then the way Ethereum was doing with an account based model and a Turing complete language EVM was like really amazing. And then from there there was no stopping, and I started myself doing some solidity contracts and things like that. And like how Web3 library came in, and you can integrate your web pages with that. All that was very fascinating. And like, as an early developer at that point in time, your mind used to wonder that, okay, what all is possible with this. So yeah, I mean definitely it was much better than and evolved than what I had vaguely thought in the back of my mind.
Right. And so you see Ethereum and you like it a lot, but you quickly realize that there's going to be some scaling issues here. And I guess you came to the conclusion at some point that, you were in a position to help solve these issues, potentially before Ethereum, itself as like the layer one could sort of solve it all on its own. So you sort of had this moment, I guess, in 2017 when you realized this and started building. I'd love to hear like sort of the motivation behind Polygon from day one, and then secondarily, for those who aren't familiar with Polygon and what it is, if you could give sort of, I know you're like a very technical guy, but if you could give the simplest explanation possible that maybe like a fifth grader could try to understand, I think that would be pretty cool.
Yeah. So, firstly, I did not realize the scaling issue. Immediately I came across Ethereum. I think this was like I started developing some dApps in late 2016 to. I mean, this was just after the whole DAO thing had happened, and I was not there. I think when the DAO thing happened, but just after that, I had gotten involved, and I started building some DApp. So I did not figure the scalability issue that early. And that, I mean, I did realize that, okay, this is still kind of costly. But then when, this whole crypto kitties thing happened, then it was like, it was very clear, that, okay, this is not going to happen, that, even with few hundred or few thousand users, the whole network is choked. This is not going to happen. And then I think scalability also in that around that time started becoming a big theme. I think the larger attention grabbing to scalability happened via some of these other layer ones trying to build Ethereum killers and things like that. And we all know the mania of 2017, where these projects raised like gazillions of dollars to build, and just on the white papers basically, and the profile of the founders. And that drew a lot of attention to the scalability, but everybody wanted to compete and build something different than Ethereum. And then approaches that many of them mentioned that there will be a separate programming language and all that. I don't know why, but probably Solidity and this stack, even though whatever problems it has some level of stickiness to it. I think it might be the same JavaScript kind of kind of effect on this. So immediately when when I used to read those white papers, I was like, who is going to develop on these platforms? And of course, like Ethereum's rise has also been meteoric in that sense. Like in that around that time when the developer community was completely engrossed by Ethereum. So I never really picked up any conviction on these chains which were building Ethereum competitors. I found that very very improbable or improbable in that sense, right? So and then I stumbled upon these Ethereum scaling approaches and all that, and I was looking at them from a distance. But then, and I had seen Joseph Foon and Vitalik, they came up, and Omisego was there. And definitely, I mean, in this market, whether you're a developer, a marketer, or business guy, markets. And then Omisego was going crazy, and that's when I first time I heard about Plasma and all that. And later on, I met JD, who's my technical, I mean, who basically came up with this idea. And then he kind of reached out to me. We used to solve a lot of technical queries in Indian community. So we both knew that, okay, we both understand the sort of technology more deeply than others over there. But when I kind of met JD and saw his like kind of POC that he was working on, I was immediately kind of convinced that something like this I did not know whether this, but I knew that something like this will eventually end up scaling Ethereum, because even though like now it feels like it was long ago, but Ethereum still had a huge amount of traction even by that time also, also with this all these ERC20s and things on the on chain. So it looked and it felt like ETH 2.0, the way the sharding was being discussed, the specs being made and all that, it was very clear that it is going to take a huge amount of time. And like it's not going to be easy to build an alternate layer one. So kind of it was some sort of intuition that the solution lies somewhere in the middle, in the form of layer two, where there is one strong layer one like Ethereum, which has a strong native asset which provides the crypto economic security to this chain. And this chain can act as a settlement layer or the security layer for the other computation layer or transaction layers on top of it. So I mean, I think that those intuition and your kind of the real time experience with the dApps led to this thing that this is something where we can dedicate our lives into. And then we started with as Matic network, and it was a plasma based solution. And then what happened is that Ethereum community has this kind of tendency to move from one hype to other hype, right? So initially it was before plasma, I think it was state channels, and everybody was like, yeah, state channels are going to solve the scalability forever and all that. And then we realized problems of the state channels. Then plasma was there, and for good amount of time plasma was the thing. And then after that then optimistic rollups came along, like as an idea in, I think, in 2019 Osaka. Then ZK rollups came in, and then Starkware was there in parallel and all that. So the community kept on moving. So what we realized, and I kind of reached out to my like we had our board meeting with other co-founders and all that, and I said that if we want to build a long term impact and a long term solution, long term product which people adopt, we need to move away from these approach centric scalability this thing, and go after our vision. Our vision is bringing scalability to Ethereum, that is in a larger scope, not like a very narrow description of what exactly is layer 2 and how it can add and think on a larger sense that how it can add value to the Ethereum main chain. And the second thing is bring adoption. These two were the main visions for us, like scale Ethereum, and then on the layer 2 or the secondary layer, not on the base layer. And second thing is get adoption, right? So these two have been our north poles, basically north stars. Now with that, like I mean, they also got intrigued with this and all that, and we came along. Mihailo, who was like who we later onboarded as co-founder on Polygon, where he was working on something similar, that having a multi-approach scaling aggregator for Ethereum. And then we completely hit it off. And then we onboarded him as one of the co-founders, and then we rebranded into Polygon, where he's one of the co-founders. And then Polygon essentially is a secondary layer or a layer 2 aggregator, which actually believes that Ethereum scaling is basically a spectrum, where on the left extreme you have you can have sovereign side chains which have their own consensus, own token or whatever, but they are still integrated with Ethereum, kind of like XDAI, but they still add some network effect to Ethereum. And then on the other extreme, you can have, let's say, pure layer 2s, which are like ZK rollups and like optimistic rollups. But there can be on these two extremes there can be middle solutions also, like Polygon POS, which arguably is the most adopted chain today, has 1500 plus applications in terms of the daily average users. It surpassed Ethereum main chain daily active addresses in terms of that, and all that. It lies somewhere in the middle. It's not a sovereign chain. That means it cannot exist without Ethereum, but it also doesn't use Ethereum for the entire amount of or entire security of the transactions. It somehow is a kind of attached chain on top of Ethereum, but it has no identity if we remove Ethereum from the below, the chain will technically stop. And then between this POS chain and the kind of layer twos, like the pure layer twos, you have validums where you keep the dispute resolution on Ethereum, but you keep the data availability on an external chain, or external committee, like like the way Starkware does. These are called validums. So across this spectrum, you have different kinds of solution which can add value and scale Ethereum. So we at Polygon is basically that we are a suite of solutions which provides various different kind of technology, kind of stacks which you can use as per the requirement of your application. But the other thing is that this chain comes with a full Ethereum. Like, we believe that all these chains should have EVM and Ethereum compatibility, so that you can have exactly same development experience as the main chain, main chain Ethereum. And that has been the core thesis, and that has worked for us pretty well. And on a larger scale also, we believe that, at the end of the day, layer one, we feel, and I personally also feel that layer one is a last man standing game, because layer one is all about decentralization. And like, I don't believe in that narrative that the layer, or the decentralization doesn't matter. I mean, if you look at the large enough time frame, decentralization is why we started this whole industry for. So I find that argument very kind of myopic in nature. And the main thing is that once you have that layer one as a decentralized layer, you can make it decentralized if there is a native asset which can act as the crypto economic security agent in that layer one, right? And then that asset needs to have strong money properties, because then only it can be a hard asset which can actually guard or act as the security asset on this layer one, right? And that's where I feel that, people say that the future is going to be multi-chain. I say yes, future is going to be multi-chain, but it is going to be multi-chain on top of Ethereum, because on layer one, I feel that it's a last manding thing. Forget about other layer one competing with Ethereum and coexisting together. I feel that even between Bitcoin and Ethereum, there will be one layer one which will eventually become the fundamental layer for Web3. And I definitely have more reasons to believe that that is Ethereum, not Bitcoin, because a lot of things in Bitcoin, like how Bitcoin accrues value, are like, I personally don't believe in them. And I've been in those camps that where I've, like, gone through all those, like, stock to flow ratios and all kind of things that Bitcoin maximalists would say. So our thesis is very clear that, eventually Ethereum is going to emerge as the fundamental layer for the internet. It's kind of the optical fiber lines, and transcontinental optical fiber lines, but then each application might have its own subnets within it. Each geographies might have their own subnets between them. So kind of that analogy you can think of. And then Ethereum is that base layer, the central layer, which connects the whole globe, or probably even within interplanetary system and all that. And I don't want to go into the like the sci-fi thing, but I'm saying that it can become one central layer where the value exists, and then the kind of business logic on this value can be applied, and computations can be done on the layer two. And that's where is our thesis is. And we believe, especially the zero knowledge technology is eventually going to come up, which will provide internet level scale to this fundamental value layer. So that is our thesis, and that's where we are with Polygon.
Yeah, I appreciate you laying that out, and I would love to dig into multiple parts of that, but we're coming up on time, and I did want to discuss a few new sort of news coming out, like some pieces of news coming out of Polygon relatively recently. You guys have Polygon Studios now, $100 million fund to incubate gaming and NFTs. Just this week, you came up with a partnership with DraftKings, also focused on NFTs and Web3. I'm curious, like, the focus on NFTs and gaming, and you mentioned earlier, like, you guys have more active addresses on a daily basis than Ethereum even. What's sort of behind this focus? And this will be the last question because I know we're coming up on time, but what's the focus on NFTs and gaming and specifically like going after as many daily active users as possible? What's driving this emphasis for you guys?
Yeah, so I mean, for us, like as I said, that our thesis is very clear that we are very adoption focused, and we want to do things which bring more users on the platform. And our job is to provide the infrastructure to these applications, but in the short run, also provide them distribution channels where they can grow their user bases. And that's where the ecosystem is, like this ecosystem fund was also built, where we can support them with initially investments, and later on, like bringing them connects and helping them with more distribution for their applications. So it's a kind of a all-round strategy. And why I wanted to separate Polygon Studios from Polygon is that, so that it can basically have a kind of razor focus on the NFT side of things, because I personally feel that NFTs are probably like the Trojan horses of crypto industry, to go into the real world and get users, start getting users into there. And we can't even imagine how many millions of users are going to create their first ever blockchain wallets, probably not even knowing that they created their own blockchain wallets, due to NFTs. And that's why, like that vision of like our larger vision of getting adoption is what, like as I said, is our north pole, or the north star, which we chase. And then Polygon Studios is doing exactly that. In terms of gaming and NFTs, I mean, one thing is that because we grew up and we kind of started from India, we did not have a lot of Silicon Valley VCs and all that. In fact, back in 2018 bear market, almost nobody invested in us. We raised a very small amount of capital compared to $15 billion fully diluted valuation Polygon today has. We raised in total like 600 or 700K VC money, and then $5 million in an IEO that we did on Binance Launchpad. Apart from that, we did not raise any VC capital. And due to that, like we still feel that, especially on the Twitter world, we still don't have that level of visibility, which a lot of Silicon Valley projects enjoy, even if they do a smaller thing, like, we recently talked about DraftKings and all that, because Polygon is basically the hub of NFTs. Like we all talk about metaverses, like all these Web3 metaverses, the biggest of one, they exist on Polygon, right? I mean, you talk about Decentraland, you talk about Somnium Space, or whatever, I mean, the bigger ones, you will dig through, you will find out that the top 6 7, or even the top 10 one, probably 80-90% of them exist on Polygon or are integrated with Polygon. Similarly, on the blockchain and gaming side of things, if you speak to 10 different games, I can guarantee you that 6 to 7 applications will tell you that they are building on Polygon. And Polygon is fairly big on that. And then one of the purpose of Polygon Studios was also to be able to educate the community on what all is happening on the NFT side of things. It's just that we don't have these. We do have, but then we don't have like any of these NFTs which have these arts and these degenerative arts, which sells for hundreds of thousands of dollars, and technically right. So also, because the thesis is that those kind of trades should happen on the main chain itself. So we have that, but then those do not get enough traction in the market. But as you mentioned about DraftKings and all that, like there is so much of IP and so much of various kinds of projects that are coming on Polygon, celebrities coming on Polygon, and celebrity platforms coming on Polygon, that it's absolutely crazy. And that's why Polygon Studios is there to exclusively focus on that.
Yeah, this story of Polygon sort of serving as the bridge to mainstream and adoption through these different things like NFTs and games and partnerships with DraftKings and the like. It definitely resonates and makes a lot of sense. And I'm looking forward to seeing how Polygon grows in the years to come. And I just want to thank you one more time, Sandeep, for coming on the show. It's been great talking with you, and appreciate the candor throughout, and also hope the charity thing goes well as well, and that you're able to somehow manage them both at the same time. But it's really awesome to watch, and And yeah, I appreciate you coming on again. Where do you want to drive people to follow you and your story and Polygon and all the rest after the show?
Yeah, so we are on Polygon. I think our Twitter and Telegram handles are the most, kind of active ones, and where we broadcast. Like, I think Twitter handle is the most easiest one. So go to 0x Polygon on Twitter, and then for me, you can follow me at the rate Sandeep Nalwal, my exact name. And I keep shilling Polygon from there. So if you and all the news you want from Polygon, you can get from 0x Polygon. And if you need any extra spicy chills, then follow me also about Polygon, and you can get a lot of information from us about Polygon from there.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, Sandeep. Awesome talking with you.
Thank you so much, Jake, for having me here. Thanks. This was really amazing.